Hi, I'm John Nicholas. Thank you for joining the second half Chicago Forum. I'm joined by Dan Kotin, who is an attorney and a partner at Tomasik Kotin Kasserman, one of the premier plaintiffs' law firms in the city of Chicago, and I would say the country. Dan has served as the past president of the Chicago Bar Association, has also been a board member of the law school at Loyola University, and Dan, I know a number of other board positions that you've served on.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to be on a lot of legal organization boards. As you mentioned, I was president of the Chicago Bar Association. I was president of the Loyola Law School Board of Governors, president of a group called the Society of Trial Lawyers. I'm in the American Bar Association House of Delegates. I'm part of a group called the International Society of Barristers. I could run through the whole list, but most of my involvement is law related.
Right. And so why did you decide to serve as the president of the CBA, and why did people decide you would be a good candidate for that position?
You don't really decide to serve. It's a matter of you run and you're elected. And I grew up in law, loving the Chicago Bar Association and finding it to be a very important part of my legal and professional development. And so I worked my way up as a young lawyer through what they call the Young Lawyers section, committee chairmanships. Then I was elected to the Board of Managers, and I served on the board for 2 years, which is a normal 2-year term. After that, I ran for treasurer, and I served as treasurer for a couple of years before running for second vice president. And once you're elected second vice president, you matriculate up into the presidency. I think that the Bar Association involvement is crucial if you want to be engaged in a legal community. For me, Chicago is my legal community, and my involvement in the Chicago Bar Association is really probably responsible for most of my interaction and success that I've had as a trial lawyer. Folks often ask me, where do you get your business? And my answer is, I don't know. I don't have a specific ability to draw a line between cases I have and where I got them from. But I would venture to guess that the majority of my cases come from other lawyers who I've gotten to know through Chicago Bar Association involvement.
So your year as president of the CBA, what did you hope to accomplish? What did you accomplish? And was it in line with your expectations?
You never know what to expect. And I think we had a fantastic year, my year of the CBA. Truthfully, when I went into it, my real objective was to go into it with all of the energy I could possibly muster and bring as much life to the organization as I could. In terms of objectives going in, there's a lot of repetitive objectives that take place every year, and you hope the president can carry those through. I remember as I launched my year, having sort of a desire to try to bridge the divide between the need for legal services out there in the community and the need at the time for lawyers to find work, because there were an awful lot of underemployed or unemployed lawyers, thousands of them, and there were many, many thousands of citizens who needed legal services but couldn't find a lawyer or couldn't afford a lawyer. And so those two groups didn't know each other, and one of my objectives going into the year was to help them meet each other and create an intersection so that we could help legal services in the community.
For some of the people watching this who aren't familiar with the CBA, what are some of the initiatives where they do intersect between the community and legal services, and the CBA in particular?
Well, the Chicago Bar Association has a charitable arm called the Chicago Bar Foundation. And the Bar Foundation works with many different legal organizations which are designed to provide legal services for people that either don't have the ability to pay for it, or even if they could pay a little bit, they don't have the knowledge necessary to find the lawyer help that they need. And so through the Chicago Bar Foundation, they serve that purpose. Not enough. There's still an awful lot of unserved legal needs out there, but the CBF is a help. So let me share one other answer to your first question when you talked about what my objectives were in my year as CBA president. As I mentioned going into the year, I think my one unique objective was to try to create an intersection between legal services and those that need the services. But as the year went on, things happened, and you may remember that it was in the winter and early spring of 2017 that the violence epidemic in Chicago really hit its peak. There was the horrible situation with Laquan McDonald and the video that surfaced, and it was really an unprecedented level of murders and violent crimes going on in Chicago. So what we did sort of on short notice in the spring of 2017 is put together what we called a violence summit, where we asked representatives from every interest group around town to come together in the Standard Club Grand Ballroom, and we put together a day-long summit not to complain about the violence problem, not to point fingers and cast blame as to who's responsible for the violence problem, but to simply understand what was going on and hopefully ask the right questions and maybe set a path towards coming up with some answers. And so we had a fantastic summit in the spring of 2017, where we had representatives from the mayor's office, from the police department, from city council, from the state house, from the state legislature, from local churches, from civic organizations, lawyers, victims, and everybody came together and shared their experiences so that people could better understand, and I think it was a big success.
Great. So with this, intersection of other groups with the CBA that you just talked about in that situation, how do you keep those links, going, those connections going, into the future? Or was that more of a one-time thing, or is it able to build on those connections throughout the city going forward?
Well, the Chicago Bar Association, being the second largest municipal bar association in the country, has a name that's recognized and respected. And so it's fortunately pretty easy, if you're speaking on behalf of the CBA, to be able to catch the attention of whoever it is that you may want to have a relationship with. So we do have those ongoing relationships. One thing that I left the group with at the end of that summit and at the end of my year was that what you can't do with this or any other initiative is simply make one splash and then move on to something else, because you need follow through, otherwise there's no outcome. And so last year, the president that followed me carried on with the initiative, with the Violence Summit. He took a little bit of a different angle and approached it a little bit differently, but it continued. And here we are in April of 2019, and to be honest, I don't know whether or not there's been any further efforts towards the violence issue this year, but I hope there will be, because as with any initiative, if you don't continue it, it's a waste of time.
So working within an organization, the good thing of having someone like yourself who's experienced and has worked their way up the ladder, is now in a position of leadership, is you do have that perspective and you do have those many years of experience. On the other hand, you're dealing with maybe changes in the profession, changes in technology, different perspectives of younger members of the CBA. How have you found that change over time? It may be slower maybe than other industries, I don't know. And how do you also integrate the thoughts and ideas of how younger people would like to operate and work with the CBA as being a member? You're
touching on a very, very important, hot topic right now, because it's a big concern, and that has to do with the concept broadly of membership and the millennial generation and Generation Z, the generation after the millennials. From the legal perspective, I can tell you that bar association memberships are plummeting nationwide. For example, the American Bar Association, the national organization essentially representing all lawyers throughout the entire nation, has a membership that's dropped by about half in the last 10 years. All bar associations are having membership problems. The Chicago Bar Association, for a long time, was immune to that. When I was on the Board of Managers, I think we had about 22,000 members, like as I mentioned, second largest in the nation. When I was president, I think we had 19,000 members. Now that number is even lower, and that's just a pure reflection on a changing view of organized bars by the younger generation. When I complain about that, and I worry about that with people our age, I'm told that it is not unique to law. It applies to all areas of life where the younger generation is adverse to the concept of memberships, period.
So why is that? Why are they join all sorts of memberships, online memberships, clubs, different groups. Why not? What's the decline of the professional organization membership?
Here's what I'm getting at, and I'm a little bit hesitant to speak definitively about this because I don't know if we have an answer yet. But when I've complained to millennials and Generation Z people about why don't you people like to join things, the response is, we do join things. In fact, we join more things than you join. And they're all members of all sorts of online groups. But here's the distinction. If you join a bar association, Chicago Bar Association for example, you've got to join as a member. You've got to work your way up to committee leadership. Then you have to work your way into a board position. And then from the board position, you have to run for an office. And from that office, you run for the presidency. And there's a process, and there's a hierarchy, and there is a respect that is given to a person's place within the organization and a deference that's given to those that are elder. I don't believe that the young generation sees any usefulness in this. And I think that the younger generations like to join, for example, a Facebook group on a particular topic or subject that they're interested in. And when you join a Facebook group, you are all of a sudden part of the conversation as a co-equal with somebody who might be 30 years your senior, that much more experienced, but there is none of the layers of bureaucracy involving committees and chairmanships and giving deference to somebody with more experience. And so there, I think, is the difference in the approach from the new generation.
What do you see as the pros and cons of that kind of approach versus maybe the older approach of working your way up the committee structure and then taking increasingly more important roles in leadership? What do you see as from their perspective, what are the pros and cons of what their current approach is?
Well, from my perspective, that's the way it's always been. I went through that process. I worked my way up. Now I'm there, and now they should do the same thing and follow me. But that's just my perspective. Right. That generation doesn't feel that way. And
are they wrong? Or?
No, they're not necessarily wrong at all. And maybe they're right because maybe they have just as much to offer as I do. And why shouldn't they be able to just click into a Facebook group on a topic and have an equal voice that I have, regardless of how many years they've been doing this? So they may be right. And what I propose doing in terms of bar associations, not just the Chicago Bar, but the American Bar Association and other groups that I'm involved in as well, is rather than trying to diagnose the issue that's coming from a younger generation and accommodate for their desires and needs based on guesswork, I think what we need to do is learn from these folks through focus groups, through conversations, through whatever it takes to learn what Generation Z and what the millennials want out of organized bars, and then adapt accordingly. Folks that are involved in Chicago Bar Association leadership talk about the future and worry about declining membership and what's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I speculated that 15 years from now, the Chicago Bar Association membership might be 5 times larger than it is right now. We may have 100,000 members, but of those 100,000 members, 99,000 of them spend all of their time interacting on their smartphones and never once step foot in the Chicago Bar building. And that doesn't mean that the Bar Association is failing just because people don't go there anymore. It could be more vibrant than ever. It just might be in a different form, and we need to learn that.
So serving in your various board and leadership roles, what are some of the things you've learned about serving in those kind of capacities, elected or voluntary, and you might share with someone who's thinking about becoming more involved in maybe charitable organizations or more involved in serving in those kind of roles in professional organizations?
I think the first thing that anybody needs to do when they get involved in an organization and you're thinking of trying to make a move towards leadership is make sure you have a real understanding of the culture. And you've got to have a good sense of the climate that you're involved in. And to a certain extent, you have to start by adapting to the culture of that organization. And if you have some grand plans to make changes, that's terrific. But it has to be done in the proper course and in due time. And the folks that I've seen that have come in and pounded their chests and tried to be the savior with all these new grand ideas, it doesn't work well. You've got to adapt to the culture, you've got to blend into the culture, and then once you earn the respect of the people around you, you can start to offer some ideas to make changes and do things in a way that you think might be better.
Anything, I know you've spent many years in the organization, anything about, after your year of serving as president of the CBA, that you maybe hadn't fully appreciated about the role, going into it?
A couple of things. Number one, in order to do anything in terms of a volunteer organization and do it well, you have to dive into it, and it has to be a commitment. There's all sorts of people in leadership positions that do it for the title, and they check the box and they do what they have to do based upon some schedule that's handed to them, but that's really a useless type of position and doesn't accomplish anything. If you want to have success, you have to dive in and you have to be committed to it. That's the one thing that jumps out. I'm sure there's many more.
So even if you do get, a big increase in the number of members who are, say, members of the CBA, but they're working online, how does that affect the structure of the CBA and sort of the services it's delivered and the educational or mentoring or other traditional functions of the organization?
It's a concern because the Chicago Bar Association, back when I started, and I've been practicing for 28 years now, was an organization that was so necessary for lawyers in the city because, number one, they had a law library. There was no online legal research available, and so lawyers, lots of them, had to go to the Chicago Bar's law library to learn the law and to research things. They also had a lunchroom where lawyers would have to go in order to interact with other lawyers that they might not otherwise see because there was no electronic communication available. And a lawyer who might be practicing by himself or herself or in a small firm would have to go somewhere to interact with other lawyers, and that was necessary. They also provided continuing legal education seminars all the time. And lawyers would go over and sit in a big room and listen to people speak on legal topics and get their CLE credits that way. Don't have to do that anymore because now that's all available online as well. So these are issues that are of a big concern in law, and I'm sure it's a big concern in other industries as well. And I think what the new generation is missing out on is these one-on-one personal relationships that we've developed the way we've developed them. And I'm sure they're developing relationships in their own way, but I have to conclude that they're missing out on a lot by not doing the one-on-one FaceTime together with each other. I think that's a problem. Organizations generally, not just Chicago Bar Association, but other legal organizations and other organizations in society that I'm involved in, seem to be getting older. We started out around the same time, and we were the young kids in organizations, and we worked our way up, and then we get to be sort of the median age, and then the plan would be that a new generation would come in below us, and we would soon become the elder statesmen. We're really not, because that new generation doesn't seem to be coming in with the same enthusiasm that we did. And if we just keep things operating the same way, and we keep operating our organizations because that's how it always was, they're going to get smaller and smaller, and they're going to shrivel up, and pretty soon these bar organizations, which used to be vibrant and big, and we would have luncheons with 250 people in the room, it'll be a group of 12 old white guys sitting around a table having lunch.
Right.
And that's a
how important do you think that is? The sitting at lunch at the CBA, or having the personal connection, and hello, Jim or Sally or whatever, and just sort of that informal interaction. How important is that really for the legal profession and to have a successful legal practice in your view?
Personally, I think that's very, very important, because when I'm handling a case and I have an opponent and there's a lawyer on the other side that I know through some source other than just this lawsuit, that means everything, because so much of what we do as lawyers is based upon respect and trust and honesty that you have to, I think, benefit from a personal relationship with somebody. I think both sides benefit from that, and so I think that's very, very important. Younger generations will tell me that I'm just being old-fashioned, and the truth is they can develop terrific relationships with somebody through an online communication, and they don't ever have to meet the person face-to-face. I don't think it's the same. I don't think it develops the same type of connection, and so I'm hoping maybe it's cyclical, and that in the course of time people will spend more time together, but I'm beginning to realize that's probably not realistic. As we see, law firms are shrinking their physical spaces, at least in the downtown Chicago area, because they don't need as much physical space, because so many of their lawyers are now practicing remotely from their phones, from their laptops, from home. That's going to make the time together that much more difficult to happen, because people are going to be coming from much further distances if you're going to drag them in and make them sit in a room together. No, I think the issue there, and it's a legitimate conversation, I mean I've had it dozens of times, is that there's a whole paradigm shift in terms of the generational view of memberships, period. Country clubs. I'm at Sunset Ridge, and we're having a terrible time with membership there because folks don't want to join things and be part of any kind of formal membership issue, and they feel like they can. For example, on the so there's a new movement with country clubs where there's going to be an app, and you have to join this app, which costs a lot of money, and when you do that, you're going to have the ability to play golf at any one of a number of country clubs anywhere around the state. And none of the BS in terms of having to apply for membership and be sponsored and go to cocktail parties, and you're just going to be able to just click, I'm going to play at Westmoreland on Saturday, and just show up and play. And then they say, well, then I'm a member of all these clubs. Well, not really. But who's to say that they're wrong and we're right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because fewer people are playing golf now.
I know, but I mean, I just use that as an example, but law school applications across the country, way down. I don't know, it's just a different...
And maybe I ask you this, but does that affect the delivery of legal services, or does it not? Is it just an older perspective, and that the delivery of legal services is just as good or better than it's ever been?
The delivery of legal services is better and easier to the extent that it can all be done nationally now. Because everything is, just a phone call or a click away. You can have some terrific legal services provided to you here in Chicago by a lawyer that might be sitting in Dallas, Texas. And it really doesn't matter, whereas 25 years ago that would have been really unworkable, okay? The truth is, with law school applications way down, with fewer lawyers joining bars, licensed bars across the country, I kind of fear that we're going to have a decrease in the quality of the legal work that's being performed over the course of the next couple of decades. But then again, that's me, speaking from this stage of my career, and making guesses about the future of legal services. And I could be wrong about that, but I don't think going to law school is nearly as competitive as it used to be. I worry that it's not being seen as prestigious as it used to be, and I worry about the outcome being a lower quality of product.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for being on the second half Chicago Forum. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.